What is up, everybody? Welcome in to an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You, of course, can follow me on X at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. You didn't think I'd be gone that long, did you? Not quite 100% yet. For those of you who are maybe unaware, just recently had acid reflux surgery this past Monday. But of course, I couldn't leave you guys for that long, and it is so great to be back chatting with you. First of all, thank you so much for all of the reach outs, the comments, everything. It has meant a ton. And it really went a long way as I was kind of going through the process of just sort of buoying my spirits. So I appreciate you guys so freaking much. Like I said, you guys knew I wouldn't be gone long. It is wonderful to be back chatting Packers. Probably going to try to keep today's a little bit shorter, but for those of you in the know, anytime I say I'm going to keep it short, I usually end up going long. So we'll just see how things go. I want to start off by thanking our new Pack-A-Day members, Nikki Santana, David Zucker, Brandon Gare, Jack Wilson, Joseph, a.k.a. Jay Way, John S., Riley Menke, and brand new Hall of Fame member, Dan Miller. Thank you guys so incredibly much for signing up. Some news while I was out. Packers re-signed Eric Wilson and Robert Rochelle, two very special teams-esque signings. Robert Rochelle definitely falls in the category. Actually, both of them really fall in the category of having to earn their job in training camp. Rochelle definitely so. Eric Wilson finds himself in a very interesting position where they're moving to a 4-3. And yes, we can say over and over and over and over again, 80% of the time they're going to be in nickel defense or dime defense, probably spend 15% of the time in an actual 4-3 defense. But they are moving to a 4-3. They release Devondre Campbell. They've got Quay Walker. They've got Isaiah McDuffie. And then not a whole heck of a lot else. They've got Christian Young, Christian Welch, and then Eric Wilson. And Eric Wilson is the most experienced and arguably just best of those three linebackers. Again, not named Quay Walker or Isaiah McDuffie. If you had to play a game today, which thankfully Green Bay does not, Eric Wilson would be your starter in your base defense. So he ends up coming into a situation where he is a core special teamer. He's one of the oldest players on the roster, which is weird for sort of a back of the roster player. Like I said, he'll still have to earn his spot in training camp, but overall, you like this signing for Green Bay. He's really a special teams captain and somebody that you can lean on. And every single time he's really been in the game as a defender, he's been fine. He's not somebody that you have to worry about. He's kind of one of those, hey, in case of emergency, he can go in, do his job, and you're not super concerned all the time of like, oh my goodness, Eric Wilson's in the game. What the heck are we going to do? There's a lot of value in a player like that. And I think a lot of people, rightfully so, excited that Eric Wilson is back. Robert Rochelle, probably a little less so, but he had a nice role on special teams at the end of the year, and he'll get his chance to earn that role back in a cornerback room that is still going to need some help overall. And we'll see if he can ultimately make the team, but his special teams prowess will give him a leg up on any sort of competition that he gets via the draft as well. Meanwhile, Christian Watson, his hamstring injury, per Christian Watson's dad on social media, he didn't go into too much detail, said that the Packers and Christian Watson can release that if they want, but did say that they found the source of what has been causing his injury concerns. And Christian Watson and the Packers have been very, open about the fact that they feel that once they identify the problem, they'll then have solutions to fix it. Well, according to Christian Watson's dad, they found the problem. So that is a great sign for Watson and hopefully something that they can remedy moving forward so that these nagging injuries cannot continue to play a part of what's been an unfortunate side of his career so far. Because when he's been on the field, he's been really freaking, fantastic. And the only thing that's really been holding him back has been those injuries. So they can get that cleared up, a huge step in the right direction for Watson and Green Bay. Also, per Bill Huber, there was almost a real legitimate kicking competition. Bill did not name specific player that they were looking to potentially sign, but apparently Green Bay had a deal finalized, or at least in the final stages, with a established kicker in the NFL. And then that kicker decided to change his mind and go in a different direction and either, I think, stay with the team that he was on. We could probably read the tea leaves as to who that could be. It ultimately doesn't matter all that much because at the end of the day, Green Bay did not sign any players at the kicker position. But it is interesting that it doesn't seem like they're done bringing in competition for Anders Carlson. That's the right way to go about it. And there's a really good chance Anders still goes out and earns the job, but you want to see him earn it in camp. And the last thing that you can have is another situation where you have a kicker that costs you games next year, and that Anders is still extremely inconsistent. If he goes and earns the job, great, so be it. He can be the kicker, but you want him to go out and earn it, and the better competition you can bring in for him, the more he's going to have to earn it. Or you just go with the better kicker, and that's fine too. But it sounds like they were very close to doing so. They did not end up doing so. We'll see if they still add someone either via the draft, remaining free agent options, or undrafted free agency. They did get Jack Podlesny earlier this offseason. Doubt that he's probably going to be the long-term answer. But either way, expect potentially some legitimate competition for Anders Carlson moving forward. We talked a little bit about A.J. Dillon prior to my absence, and specifically the fact that this was such a great contract, but we didn't know the exact parameters of the deal, and there was a way that the bonus money could swing. I said my guesstimate was that he was going to get the $167,000 guaranteed. That's exactly what he got. He got $167,500 guaranteed of his contract. That's a little bit more than like a priority unrestricted free agent for Green Bay. Usually they're in the 30 to 60,000 range for the Packers. They usually don't give out a ton of guarantees, but they have given out some guarantees in that range before. Ultimately, what that means is they will release a player with that much guaranteed on their salary. They've done it in the past, and they're certainly not going to be opposed to doing so. Ultimately, to put it in layman's terms, it means that A.J. Dillon's going to have to earn his job in training camp. This is a great deal for Green Bay. If he makes the team, he's getting barely over the vet minimum and with very minimal guarantees, and there's no downside to it. And we've seen some really good A.J. Dillon. 2021 was really good A.J. Dillon. And there's certainly some aspects he brings to the team, especially as a pass protector. You know, you'd like to see him be a little bit better and more efficient as a power runner. But again, we saw that in 2021. So if you get really good A.J. Dillon at a vet minimum deal or right around there, it's a great deal for Green Bay. If you don't, if you get a bad A.J. Dillon, if you get an A.J. Dillon that looks like he's still stuck in mud at times, that's not making plays, that is not, one of the top 3 running backs on the roster, you move on, you take your $167,500 cap hit, and you don't blink twice. And like I said, when they did the deal, this addition of A.J. Dillon will not affect how they attack the draft with the running back position at all. They've got Josh Jacobs, they've got Emmanuel Wilson, they've got A.J. Dillon. But if they feel like they can go out and get a playmaker at the running back position in the draft, they'll do so. And I don't think they'll hesitate. And certainly not because A.J. Dillon is on a $167,500 signing bonus deal are they going to hesitate in doing so. So this is you've still got to prove yourself sort of deal. Do I expect him probably to make the team? Yeah, I think he probably will be. For better or worse, we'll have to wait and see. But I think this is probably a bit of an eye-opener for A.J. Dillon too. You're an unrestricted free agent running back. You do not get many opportunities at this. And he saw the open market. And he had all 32 teams that he could have signed with. And my guess is he probably did take a little bit less to return to Green Bay. But clearly, if some team was going to give him $5 million on the open market or something, you got to believe he would have taken it. And it just did not seem like that market ever developed for him. He'll have another opportunity next year. If he goes out for Green Bay on this vet minimum deal and it's a phenomenal year, he'll have an opportunity to get paid really well this next offseason. But if he doesn't make it out of camp, that's going to be a huge, hit in the opposite direction for Dillon. So this is a really big deal for him. And I think he'll make the most of it. And hopefully he just goes out and has an amazing season. And I know some people, and you guys have heard it from me, I'm not huge into, A.J. Dillon stock. I do think you want playmakers at your playmaker positions. But if you go out and get really good A.J. Dillon at bare minimum value, that's a great deal. So I like this for Green Bay, but Dillon will have to go out and earn his job in training camp, specifically dependent upon what they do probably in, the draft and undrafted free agency and what other running backs they bring in for competition outside of just Emmanuel Wilson. And then, of course, Josh Jacobs, who has a guaranteed roster spot in tow. All right. Yosh Nijman, meanwhile, signed with the Carolina Panthers, 2 years, $8 million, $5 million guaranteed, max value up to $15 million. So good deal for Yosh. We'll talk about that deal a little bit more when we get to our offensive line portion of today's topic. That really leaves Green Bay with not many remaining free agents left. Rudy Ford, still a free agent. Josiah DeGuara, still a free agent. Patrick Taylor, still a free agent. And then David Bakhtiari, who they released, still a free agent. That's it. No other Green Bay Packers from last year are still on the market. They've either been, re-signed with Green Bay or have found other jobs like Yosh Nijman, Darnell Savage, John Runyon Jr., Devondre Campbell, etc. But not a lot of players still on the market for Green Bay. Meanwhile, three more top 30 visits have been confirmed. Christian Boyd, defensive lineman for Northern Iowa, Jarian Jones, cornerback for Florida State, and then Michael Hall, defensive tackle for Ohio State. So that brings the total amount of top 30 visits that have been reported so far up to 5. They have, no surprise here, 30 total that they can bring in. As I've said before, these are visits with players that you want to get usually additional information on. That's usually the number one reason, is that you want to do a little bit more intel, or maybe you didn't, get a full medical evaluation, or maybe you want to do a medical recheck. Those are reasons. Sometimes it's because you're really interested in the player and you really want to do a deep dive because you think they're very much on your board and you want to get as much info as possible. Another reason can be to, put teams off the smell or the scent of what you're trying to do. Maybe they actually have no interest in Michael Hall, but they want other teams to think they have interest in Michael Hall. That can be another reason. Other reasons can be undrafted free agency, where you get a little bit of a leg up by bringing in some of the players that you think are going to go undrafted. That undrafted period is hectic and it's chaotic, and you don't have much time to convince players to come to your team. So if you can meet with some of them ahead of time, give them a tour of Lambeau, show that you're interested and serious about them being a Green Bay Packer, that can give you a leg up in the undrafted market. But Christian Boyd, Jarian Jones, and Michael Hall added to that list, now up to a total of 5 that have been reported so far. And then add this one to the list as for entertainment purposes only. If we got into the discussion every single day of what was on Reddit or Twitter that some random person put out there, we probably wouldn't get a ton accomplished. But for entertainment purposes only, there was a post on Reddit that said that one of the users had been in contact with, or that the Packers had been in contact with Justin Simmons' agent. I don't spend a ton of time putting a lot of stock into Reddit or like random reports that are out there that are not by established, reporters. But let's just say if Justin Simmons and the Packers are negotiating, would be a pretty fun duo of Justin Simmons and Xavier McKinney. Like I said, I wouldn't get your hopes up. I wouldn't put too much stock into it, but it's always fun to think about potential rumors and buzz that are out there. And let's just be clear. Sometimes in the past, news has broke on Reddit and Twitter faster than it has through normal media circles. Other times it's a complete fabrication. And that's why don't get your hopes up, treat it as entertainment, but it's a fun conversation. And if Justin Simmons is here to potentially tag with Xavier McKinney, I would certainly be all for it. I did a full episode breaking down Justin Simmons. My biggest takeaway in that episode was Xavier McKinney was better, but it definitely was not, disparaging towards Justin Simmons. I do think Justin Simmons, especially more as a box safety, would be great. And I think his fit with Xavier McKinney would be ultra entertaining. And I think you get 2 really established, really good safeties, playmakers on the back end. Talk about a dream for Jeff Hafley. Don't expect it, but if it happens, sign me the heck up, and certainly would not be disappointed in it in any way, shape, or form. All right. So what I want to do today for my main topic, and like I said, probably going to try to go through this relatively quick, just as I get my lungs back under me and, just kind of back in the swing of things a little bit. Like I said, still not feeling 100%, but what I wanted to do is sort of review the Packers offseason so far. What have they done well? What's been an incomplete? What maybe have they not addressed? And I should be very, very clear here. They don't play another game for almost 6 months. It's fine for certain things here to be incomplete. It's fine for things to, still need addressing, if you will. But if they address them, that's probably better. And of course, they still have a full draft where they can address a lot of these needs and positions of maybe so-called weakness as well. But either way, they're mostly in a pretty good spot. Before even, going into it position by position, you've got Anthony Johnson Jr. that's probably paired with Xavier McKinney right now. It's probably a bit of a weakness. Your starting linebackers, Quay Walker and Isaiah McDuffie with no real depth. That's probably a bit of a weakness. Your offensive line depth, definitely a bit of a weakness. But again, there's free agency left. Green Bay's really, really good usually in the bargain free agent market. And they're really good at finding good players that can help you not only in the draft, but in undrafted free agency as well. So let's give this a hot second to play out before we jump to any major conclusions. But it's still sort of fun as we can really almost wrap up the core part of free agency so far. Like the top players are off the market. There are some Julian Blackmons and Justin Simmons that are out there. Certainly players that could still help Green Bay. A couple offensive linemen. And again, Green Bay is very adept at finding bargain free agents. So it's not to say that it's totally over, but the huge rush of free agency, the big name players, and all the huge signings for the most part have been done and are over with. Green Bay's needed releases that they needed to do are completed. So we have a pretty good idea of what the crux of their offseason is going to look like. So let's evaluate what we know so far, and then also sort of just acknowledge that, hey, there is some time left, including 11 draft picks, 5 top 100 picks, bargain free agency, undrafted free agency, and undoubtedly there are going to be some fines for this scouting staff, both on the pro level and on the college level, that are going to bring some talent into this team still. That's why we don't give it a full grade as of yet until we get to that 53-man roster as we get closer to the season. But I think if we are going to evaluate the offseason, the best way to start is really with the coaching staff. Now, it is near impossible to give this any sort of real grade, right? We have no idea how Jeff Hafley's defense is going to look in practice. We have no idea how he's going to do as an NFL defensive coordinator. We have no idea if this defense is going to take a significant jump, a small jump, no jump, a step back, a huge step back, or anything in between with going from Joe Barry to Jeff Hafley. But what we do know is this: the change from Joe Barry needed to be made, and it was made pretty aggressively. It wasn't right after the season was done, but it was pretty close thereafter. And Matt LaFleur did not hesitate. And that was a needed and necessary move for Green Bay. And they go out and they get a former, head coach at Boston College who's got a lot of defensive experience, defensive coordinator experience, head coaching experience, defensive backfield experience. And really, I thought knocked the initial press conference out of the park, which wins you nothing, by the way. Doesn't really mean he's going to be a great coordinator or a bad coordinator, but first impressions are always good. And his first impression was very, very good. I do think this is a really good hire for Matt LaFleur. Again, only time will tell, but I even love the fact that they went out and got some really good, young, energetic coaches. Derek Ansley, former defensive coordinator, Anthony Campanelli, most believe will be a future defensive coordinator. Vince Ogabasi, who was, again, I think assistant defensive coordinator at Boston College. And then even on the offensive side of the ball, getting someone like Sean Mannion that can come out and, continue to help Jordan Love with his progression. And there are others as well. But I thought Matt LaFleur and really Jeff Hafley as well did a phenomenal job in filling out their coaching staff. I'm excited for it. Like I said, it's impossible to grade at this point, but the big one was moving on from Joe Barry, which was the necessary move. And then I think just going younger, more aggressive, more energetic, it felt like the right move all the way along. Now we just have to sort of wait to see how it plays out. But so far, so good with what Green Bay was trying to accomplish and what they did accomplish in changing out some of those coordinators and coaches so far. Now the proof will be on the field on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, etc. But I'm excited to see what Hafley and this overall new coaching staff is going to be able to bring to the table. Then you have the strength and conditioning staff. You've got Aaron Hill coming in from San Francisco. They hire, I think, 3 assistants now. Again, impossible to judge. Impossible to judge what was good, bad, or ugly with the last strength and conditioning coach. We heard good things. We saw some injury issues. What you want to attribute to the strength coach, no idea. That's sort of your prerogative. But, they got really good grades from the Packers on the NFLPA from the last strength and conditioning coach. The 49ers got worse grades. Again, how this actually affects winning and losing on game days, who knows? But I do think that, sometimes it takes a new direction. Sometimes it takes some new ideas. And Green Bay's bringing in a new direction and some new ideas. And I'm not necessarily against that. Again, how you want to grade that out, be my guest. I have no idea, but it's worth noting. And I think overall, how I would, gauge Matt LaFleur's aggressiveness from a coaching staff and a strength and conditioning staff, I give overall like his aggressiveness and his process a B+, A-, A maybe even. I just think that he knew he had to make some changes. And I know those changes were not easy, but he went with his gut anyway. Now, Matt's had, one of the weaknesses of his tenure has been in, bringing in some of these new faces. Joe Barry, obviously there was sort of the arranged marriage with Mike Pettin. He's on his, 3rd special teams coordinator. Steno felt like it was probably a no-brainer, but some of his coordinator and those sort of hires have not always gone great. He's going to be very much judged on how these ones go. But I like the process that he went through. I like the aggressiveness, and I'm excited to see what Aaron Hill, Jeff Hafley, and company can bring to the table in 2024. Quarterback, pretty easy, no changes, and I think that's the right move. I don't think you need to upset the apple cart. I think they could still add a quarterback via the draft. That's the right move. You maybe give Sean Clifford some competition, if nothing else. You get maybe somebody for the practice squad or maybe as a developmental number 3. But if they can get Clifford competition, that's great. Obviously, Jordan Love has nothing to worry about. He's going to get that big contract sooner rather than later. But no news is good news here. I think spending for a big veteran free agent would not have been the right use of resources. So overall, like what they've done at quarterback, which is nothing. Running back is probably the most interesting one of everything, right? Aaron Jones gone, Josh Jacobs in, AJ Dillon back, Patrick Taylor pending. Patrick Taylor one we can just set aside. It doesn't really matter at all. AJ Dillon back is probably one of the easier portions to discuss just because it was a no-brainer on the deal that he got. This just gives Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst options. It gives them outs. It gives them an opportunity to have people compete in training camp. And if you go to camp and they draft 2 day 3 running backs, and you go to camp with Josh Jacobs, AJ Dillon, Emmanuel Wilson, and 2 day 3 picks, that's a great group to go into camp with. And you hope that maybe the younger guys are the ones that win out and show their explosiveness and show some ability to be playmakers. And maybe you go with Josh Jacobs and 2 rookies. Or maybe they don't. And maybe AJ Dillon steps up and shows that he's back in 2021 form. And maybe Emmanuel Wilson takes a big step. But you want to give yourself options. And that's why I think the Dillon one really makes sense. There's really no downside to it. So I'm very cool with that. The Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones things has been dissected to death. So we don't need to go into it in too great a detail here. You do wonder if there was any chance that they could have had both of those two coexist together. I know the timeline of events. I know that the end of the Aaron Jones era came on Friday, and then the start of the Josh Jacobs era came on Monday. Even though the move for Jones wasn't announced until Monday, it sounds like the contract was off the table as of Friday, and Jones already knew what direction they were going in. You do wonder still if they could have gotten something done. It seems like they weren't that far apart in money. How much Aaron Jones plays a part in this, Drew Rosenhaus plays a part in this, the Packers play a part in this, and how far off they really were, tough to say. But it does seem like the numbers from what Green Bay was willing to give and what he ultimately was able to receive in Minnesota were not that far off. And ultimately, this would just tell you that Green Bay wanted to go in a different direction. That's a bold stance to take. And as I've said all throughout this process, I appreciate the fact that the Packers are willing to make the unpopular decision, which is to go away from their franchise guy, the heartbeat of their team, the soul of their team. But they also went away from the heartbeat and soul of their team. And sometimes that can be bad business as well. I understand the vision, as I've said all along, going younger, going with potentially somebody who can be even a little bit, I don't even want to say more dynamic, but maybe more dynamic for a longer period of time than Aaron Jones. And I think that could be a very important part of the calculus and decision-making there. Of course, you hate to see Aaron Jones go in the division, and that has to be something that is thought of as well. How much of a threat Minnesota is with losing Kirk Cousins and some of the issues that they're going through is debatable. But he stays in the division, goes to the Vikings. You get Josh Jacobs. This is one that we're just going to have to sort of let play out, not only on the field, but in the locker room. Now, Josh Jacobs, team captain, somebody that's highly respected. He's going to be able to take on some of that mantle that Aaron Jones leaves behind. But Aaron Jones leaves behind a pretty big footprint in the locker room and on the field. Injuries are going to play a part here as well. I don't know that there was ever an avenue to keep both of them together. That's a lot of money to put into a running back position, especially to keep a almost 30-year-old running back. It's a tough one. You guys know me. I'm not going to be afraid to give my opinion. I really do wish there was a way that they could have just kept both, to be honest. And again, I don't even know if that was anywhere near something that Josh Jacobs or Aaron Jones would have ever agreed to. But my ultimate belief here, my ultimate take is I think we just need to let this play out. And if you're offended by the fact that Aaron Jones is no longer a Packer, I get it. I understand it. If you're excited about the fact that Josh Jacobs is a Packer, you think this is the smarter, better direction to go in, I understand it. I get it. And I don't have a hard take on it one way or the other. I am excited for Josh Jacobs. I am bummed about Aaron Jones. And I think that's probably just the right overall temperature of everything, is that I think it's all right to be disappointed and frustrated or bummed that Aaron Jones is no longer a Green Bay Packer, but also excited about Josh Jacobs and understandable or understanding of why the Packers would want to make this move and go in this direction. And that's where I'm at. And now we'll see how it plays out. I think if you, and as I ask people, who will have a better season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons, and we could even just say this year, even if it was apples to apples, even if Jones was in Green Bay and Jacobs were in Green Bay, or they were both in Minnesota or both with the Raiders or whatever, I think Jacobs probably is the better odds on bet to have a better overall season and play more, but there's no guarantee of that either. But again, I understand the vision. I understand what direction they went in. And like I said, disappointed Jones is gone. Excited Jacobs is here. And the other piece of that too is they paid a pretty penny, even though it's more of like a 1 year and then we'll see sort of deal. It paid a high-end contract for a running back, which is not always, best for business. They could have got Jones on a lesser contract, which maybe would have been better for business, but then he may not have played as many games, which is worse for business. That's why you can just sort of run yourself in circles. And this has to be sort of one where I'm willing to trust Brian Gutekunst and the staff to say, I guarantee you, just based on his play on the field and his level of leadership in the locker room, if they felt like Aaron Jones was going to make it through another couple seasons in full health, they would have brought him back on that deal. I don't have any real thought otherwise than that they would have just brought him back on that deal. I wholeheartedly believe something showed up in his medical, or they saw how much he had to rehab throughout the course of the year with multiple injuries, that they just felt the writing was on the wall and that he was going to be more injured than not injured moving forward. And it was smarter to go with the younger back. And I get it. I understand it. And I would just grade it out as we're going to have to wait and see. And you could do that for anything. And I get we're here to make the commentary on it, but this is one of those I could just see going in a variety of different directions. But I'll just say it one more time. Disappointed Jones is gone. Excited Jacobs is here. Let's see how it plays out. Wide receiver, no change, and understandably so. They've got 7 or 8 wide receivers that are 53-man roster capable, and you don't really need to add anything. And you have a full draft and undrafted free agency left. They didn't have any free agents at the position, so this was a clear and obvious. They were never going to be aggressive in free agency, adding a free agent wide receiver. Still wouldn't be surprised if they added one via the draft, just more competition, but they're pretty set right now with what they have at wide receiver. Tight end, Tyler Davis is back. Josiah DeGuara is pending. Don't expect DeGuara back. I like the Davis re-signing. There's no downside here either. Pretty close to a bare minimum deal. He's going to get the opportunity to earn his job in camp. To me, he could easily be a number 4 tight end. He's also played more special team snaps than anyone back when he was healthy in 2022. Let him compete. Let him go out and see if he can be a core special teamer and a number 4 tight end. And if he can, he'll be well worth the contract. And if he's not, he'll get cut. So pretty easy. They didn't really have a need for a free agent. Let Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave and Ben Sims continue to develop. They were smart for the moves that they made here. And I think not bringing Josiah DeGuara back, probably the smart move here. Offensive line's a really interesting conversation and how you want to grade this out. Gone are David Bakhtiari, Yosh Nijman, and John Runyon Jr., and you've done nothing to replace any of them. But here's this is clearly a downgrade, right? Bakhtiari gone, Nijman gone, Runyon Jr. gone, and nobody to step up in their place. You're at a pretty significant loss, especially from a depth standpoint. That's the easy way to look at it. I think another way to look at it is you had to release Bakhtiari. That was a necessary evil. You could not bring him back on that contract. Yosh Nijman, the deal that he got, good for him. But if I'm Green Bay, I'm not signing him to a 2-year, $8 million deal with $5 million guaranteed. I know there's a lot of people that would. I've been more on I'm not as sold on Yosh Nijman bandwagon. And it seems like the NFL mostly in that camp as well. I think it's a solid deal for Yosh. I think it's a solid deal for Carolina. I wouldn't have been massively upset if Green Bay did that deal, but it's probably not a deal I would have done. I'm fine with letting Yosh walk at that contract. And then John Runyon Jr., he got paid as a legit starter, $10 million per year. I don't want Green Bay to do that deal either. So on the surface, you lose 3, you bring nobody in. Your depth is waning. But on the other side, I don't want any of those deals that Bakhtiari was on or that Yosh or John Runyon Jr. got. The other thing is you go and look at the free agent market for the offensive linemen that have signed. There's not much out there that I would have done. Isaiah Wynn re-signed with the Dolphins after an injury-riddled season. He was on a fine deal. He got less than $2 million on a 1 year. Sadiq Charles, trying to think, there was maybe one other. Sadiq Charles was one. Josh Jones, I know, just signed with the Ravens. Those have been like 1 year, like cheap deals that I would have considered. But you like overall, I don't know how much that does for you more than just like drafting some guys. It certainly doesn't like let you sleep better at night from an overall depth standpoint. So there's not a lot of deals that are out there that I would have done either. I think they're probably doing the right thing by addressing it aggressively in the draft. They are at a point where they have to take some offensive linemen, but thankfully offensive lineman is one of the actual really deep positions in this draft. So I think you let this play out. Maybe you do sign a cheap veteran towards the end of this year. Maybe they can find another Rick Wagner somehow. But overall, like the offensive line got worse, but I don't disagree with the direction that they've taken because I really don't like any of the offensive line contracts that have been out there so far. Defensive line, no change, and understandably so. They've got the depth there. Maybe address it a little bit via the draft. Edge, no change, same thing. You've already got money spent on Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary. You've got the young draft pick in LVN, and Enagbare will come back at some point. You've got a Brenton Cox wild card lottery ticket, whatever you want to call it. So that makes sense. Linebacker's another interesting one. I think there were some deals out there they could have got done. Devondre Campbell gone, Christian Welch back, Eric Wilson back. I probably would have spent a little bit more time on that vet free agent market. I don't know that there's a perfect one out there that I think makes a ton of sense. I like the Patrick Queen contract was, even though he didn't get as much as I think some people expected, that would have still been exorbitant for, I think, what they wanted to do there. I think not, leaving free agency with no off-ball linebacker at all is a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. So I think this is maybe one where you wish Goot would have done maybe a little bit more. But again, I am willing to give him the benefit of the doubt to see what he's capable of in the draft. But you're really counting on Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, and draft picks. There's not a free agent left. Now, somebody could get released, during training camp or something like that, but it's usually they're released for a reason. But Goody's pulled crazier things, out in the past. Maybe they can find somebody in the practice squad mid-season. There's trade options, but that's the one spot where you do feel like maybe the ball was dropped just a little bit, and maybe they're still not valuing off-ball linebacker the way that they should be. That position is a little bit more barren than you would like. Yes, Quay could take a step. Yes, McDuffie could take a step. But I think even from a depth standpoint, starting capable standpoint, you wish there was a little bit more competition there. Cornerback, another interesting one. You probably didn't need to do anything ultra aggressive here, but they do ultra aggressively bring back Keyshawn Nixon on a real legitimate starting slot corner deal. I think that's maybe one of their more questionable decisions. And I'm not even saying it's wrong. And when we had the discussion with Paul Brettel, I don't mind the fact that you're like paying for part special teamer, part corner. There's a lot of value for what he can bring on a 48-man game day roster. There really is. I don't think this is a bad deal, but I do think it's aggressive. It's probably a little bit more. If you look at somebody like Kendall Fuller, who got not a ton more and is a much better cover corner, now doesn't bring any of the special teams value, I think that's more of a direction I would have gone in. Now, Fuller is older, only got a 2-year deal and did get more money. And like I said, does not have any special teams value. But I like the idea a lot more of a Carrington Valentine, Kendall Fuller, Jair Alexander cornerback group than a Valentine or Stokes with Jair and Keyshawn corner group. I do think they're going to have to maybe make some decisions on how they go about some more obvious passing downs. I will say Keyshawn got better at the end of the year. I did think he played some of his best cover corner, slot corner football of his career at the end of last season. But I do think there's some deficiencies and weaknesses there. And they did give him a pretty decent sized contract. That's going to be the questionable one. Like bringing back Ballantyne. Like I said, Robert Rochelle is going to have to earn his job in camp, but that overall makes sense. Safety is another one. Xavier McKinney, awesome player. Such a huge deal, such a perfect fit. We've gone over that ad nauseum, but they did give him a massive deal compared to every other safety on the market. They paid premium value for a premium safety. It's going to be important that they get premium safety play out of him to pay off what is a very high-end deal compared to the rest of the market, while guys like Julian Blackmon and Justin Simmons are still on the market and likely will get much lesser deals because they are lesser players. But, the proportionate portion of that will be very interesting to keep an eye on. Jordan Fuller gets a very cheap deal. I mean, Jordan Poyer, who doesn't really fit the timeline and is definitely wearing down, but gets a 1-year, $2 million deal. Meanwhile, Green Bay has not addressed that other safety position. That's sort of an interesting aspect of this as well. We'll love them to get a Julian Blackmon or a Justin Simmons still to pair with Xavier McKinney, but more likely this ends up being a draft pick. They do still have Anthony Johnson Jr., Benny Sapp, those sort of players, Zane Anderson. Meanwhile, Darnell Savage, Jonathan Owens, both gone. Rudy Ford still a pending free agent. I think all of those are the right moves. They needed a turnover at the safety position. They did it. And I think, like I said, that was the really smart move. I love the Xavier McKinney signing. This overall is a really good offseason for the safety for Green Bay by getting McKinney. But there is that spot open still. I would love them to address it. Don't know if they will, but let's give them through the draft to see what they ultimately do. And on special teams, no real kicker competition yet, other than, again, Jack Podlesny. But they do bring back Tyler Davis, Eric Wilson, Keyshawn Nixon, Corey Ballantyne, Robert Rochelle, who are all core special teams players. This is a huge season for Rich Bisaccia's special teams. It needs to be better. He has core special teamers. He has to pay that off. This has to be at least a top 20 special teams. I'm not asking for a ton here. I'm just saying, this can't be a bottom 3, bottom 5 again. Can you get to 20th? That would be a step in the right direction. You have some guys that are core special teamers. They've been here now for a while. The special teams has to be better. Green Bay continues to address it. They continue to bring some of these guys back. Now it's up to Rich Bisaccia. I do know they need to continue to get the kicker and long snapper positions figured out, but they got to get it figured out, and it needs to be better, and it needs to be top 20. Overall, I would grade this so far as a B to B+. You do still have some question marks. Off-ball linebacker being the biggest, depth at offensive line being another big one, but you do still have 11 draft picks, 5 in the top 100, bargain free agent, undrafted free agents, and I'm excited to see what Goot and the staff can do through the remainder of free agency in the draft. And I do think this roster is going to continue to get better, and it's already pretty freaking good. And I think that's what you have to really lean on so far is if they did have to go into a game today, they've got a pretty good roster. There's some holes. Depth on the offensive line, really a key one there. But I do think they're going to fill a lot of that, and I'm really excited to break down some of the bargain free agents and specifically the draft picks that they do ultimately end up with that will help build some of the depth and foundation of this team moving forward. What did I tell you guys? I can't do a quick, short, easy one on my first one back. There's too much to discuss. It is great talking to you guys again. Thank you so much for being here. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and All-Pro members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Shea Dad, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Bremen, David Prendergast, and Dan Miller. That list keeps getting longer, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. Don't miss it. Subscribe, like, comment, check out those memberships. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.